Ever feel like, I don't know, like some systems are kind of stacked against certain folks?
Definitely.
You send over Christian Ortiz's Building Bridges, Dismantling Barriers, and, well, it seems like we're both pretty keen to explore how this whole justice AI thing can tackle that very problem. What grabbed me right away is how Ortiz, he's a global AI ethics expert, right?
Shit.
He doesn't tiptoe around the issue. He dives right into how even the tech that's meant to be objective, like AI, can end up making existing inequalities even worse.
Yeah, it's refreshing, isn't it? There's this phrase he uses, Eurocentric narratives, that really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah, I underline that.
It's like he's saying that so many systems we have operate on this assumption that one set of experiences, usually Western and often white, is the norm. And that impacts everything from how we design algorithms to how we interpret the data.
Which brings us to the heart of the problem, right? It's not just that these systems miss the mark. It's that they can actually create barriers for whole groups of people. You
Exactly.
see it everywhere, unfortunately. Healthcare algorithms that are more likely to misdiagnose certain demographics, or loan applications that seem to favor one type of background over another.
Yeah.
It's like the system is blind to its own biases.
And that's where Justice AI comes in, not as a quick fix, but as a fundamental shift in how we approach technology. Ortiz uses this powerful metaphor, decolonizing AI. What do you make of that term?
Decolonizing is a loaded word, right? Makes
Yeah.
you think about power dynamics, who gets to call the shots. In the context of AI, I'm guessing it's about dismantling those ingrained biases we were just talking about, making sure we're not just replicating existing inequalities in this new tech.
Exactly. And one of the ways Ortiz suggests we do that is by embracing the concept of intersectionality. He argues that we can't just look at things like race, gender, or socioeconomic status in isolation.
Right, right.
It's about understanding how these different aspects of a person's identity kind of intersect and create a unique experience of the world and therefore a unique experience of the systems we build.
So give me an example. How would a justice AI approach, say, hiring differently because of this whole intersectionality idea?
Imagine a company that uses an algorithm to screen job applicants. A traditional system might flag a candidate who took a career break as, less qualified.
Yeah.
But a justice AI system, taking an intersectional approach, might recognize that women are statistically more likely to have taken time off for caregiving. It might then analyze the candidate's skills and experience within that context, recognizing the value of those unpaid years and sort of leveling the playing field.
So it's not just about making the algorithm blind to certain demographics. It's about actually understanding the systemic factors that might be at play and using that knowledge to create a more equitable outcome.
Precisely. It's about looking beyond the surface and asking, what are the underlying power structures at play here, and how can we use AI to challenge them instead of reinforcing them?
Which brings us to another crucial aspect of justice AI, that Ortiz highlights this idea of actually centering marginalized voices in the development process. It's one thing to say, hey, we're building fair tech, but it's another to actually have the people most impacted by these systems at the table, shaping the conversation from the ground up.
Absolutely. Ortiz is adamant that community-led assessments and feedback mechanisms are crucial. He's suggesting we move away from a top-down approach, where a few tech-savvy individuals make decisions for everyone else, and instead create space for, like ongoing dialogue and collaboration with the communities these technologies are designed to serve.
So it's less about imposing solutions and more about empowering communities to define their own needs and be active participants in shaping the technology that impacts their lives. I'm starting to see how this all ties back to that idea of decolonizing AI.
Exactly. It's about shifting the power dynamics and acknowledging that the people closest to the problem often have the most insightful solutions. But how do we actually translate these principles into practice? How do we make sure Justice AI isn't just a nice idea, but a tangible framework for building better technology? Ortiz offers a compelling answer, and it lies in a specific framework he calls.
The Decolonial Intelligence Algorithmic Framework, or
That's
DIA,
it.
as I imagine we'll be calling it.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
feels like, we need something concrete to like rein in this sprawling conversation we're having, right?
Right.
So walk me through this DIA thing. How does it actually turn these justice AI principles, all this good stuff we've been talking about, into something, well, actionable?
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's like Ortiz knew we'd be having this conversation. Like he knew we'd need more than just lofty ideals.
Uh-huh.
The DIA framework, it acts as a sort of blueprint, you know?
Okay.
It offers this set of guidelines and procedures to make sure these AI systems, they're developed and deployed in a way that actually aligns with those justice AI values we've been discussing.
I like it.
And one of the key pillars of this whole framework is transparency,
Yeah.
which seems especially relevant given all the stuff we were just saying about power dynamics.
Correct.
Who's really in control?
You say transparency, though, and I immediately think easier said than done, especially when you're dealing with something as complex as, AI. So how does the DIA framework actually make that happen? Like, how do you get real transparency in a way that actually means something? It's not like you can just, I don't know, slap a window at an algorithm and call it a day, right?
You hit the nail on the head. It's about more than just like making the code public.
Right.
The DIA framework, it pushes for this idea of explainable AI. So that means building systems where you can actually trace back how a decision was made.
Oh,
Like if an algorithm makes a decision that seems biased, unfair, you can go back and understand why. You can see the reasoning behind it. It's about having this clear audit trail.
okay, that makes sense. But let's say we can track the decision-making process and we find a bias.
That's
What then? Is DIA just about identifying problems, or does it offer any ways to actually fix them too? Because transparency without accountability feels a bit like, I don't know, putting lipstick on a pig, doesn't it?
I'm so glad you brought that up because accountability is the other side of that coin. The DIA framework, it encourages people to develop these mechanisms for redress, for actually addressing those biases and harms when they happen.
Interesting.
It's about making sure there are clear lines of responsibility and pathways for recourse if a system causes harm.
Especially the people who are already most vulnerable and marginalized, I'd imagine.
Absolutely, the people who are most likely to be harmed by biased systems in the first place.
So it's less about creating this perfect, totally bias-free AI, which feels impossible anyway.
Right.
And it's more about creating systems that we can actually monitor, that we can evaluate and hold accountable for how they're impacting different groups.
Precisely. It's about acknowledging that AI, just like any technology, is always a work in progress. And building in those feedback loops, those mechanisms for continuous improvement, that's crucial.
This is all starting to click into place for me now. We've talked about the principles of justice AI, things like decolonizing AI, intersectionality, giving marginalized communities a voice, and now we've got this concrete framework, this DIA, to actually put those principles into action.
Right.
But I think it's time we bring this down to earth a bit.
Okay.
Can you give me an example, a real-world scenario, how this might actually work? Ortiz mentions justice AI being used in things like healthcare, criminal justice, education.
Right.
Let's take healthcare. What could a justice AI system look like in that context, and how would it be different from what we have now?
Okay, so imagine a world where healthcare algorithms, instead of being trained on data that reflects existing biases, are designed from the ground up to actively identify and mitigate those biases.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me a specific scenario. How would that actually play out?
Let's say there's an AI system that's designed to help doctors diagnose heart disease.
Okay.
Studies show that traditional algorithms for this, they're more likely to miss heart attacks in women,
Really?
especially women of color,
Wow.
because they're trained on data that reflects how these groups have historically been underdiagnosed.
Which just perpetuates the problem, right? If the
Yeah.
system is flawed from the get-go, it's just going to keep spitting out biased results.
Exactly. But a justice AI approach, it would tackle this by, well, first of all, it would acknowledge that those historical inequalities exist in the data. But then it would go a step further and incorporate a much wider range of factors that are known to be relevant to women's heart health, things that a traditional system might completely miss.
So it's about making sure the data itself is more inclusive,
Yes.
but it's also about making sure that the people who are designing these systems, the people who are interpreting the data,
Yeah.
that they have a more holistic understanding of the problem they're trying to solve.
Absolutely. Because even with the best intentions, if you're not considering the full spectrum of human experience, your technology is going to reflect those blind spots. And that's why this whole idea of decolonizing AI is so important. It forces us to question those deeply ingrained assumptions about what we consider normal or objective in the first place.
It's like that saying, to the man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. We have to make sure that the tools we're building, these AI systems, are designed to address the complexity of the problems we're facing, not just reinforce the same old power structures that caused the problems in the first place.
Well said. It's about using technology to create a future that's truly more equitable and just for everyone, not just a select few.
Okay, this has given me a lot to think about, but I can't help but wonder, it feels like we've, I don't know, only scratch the surface here. I mean, we talked about all the good stuff, the potential of this justice AI, but what about the potential downsides? Are there risks in trying to bake ethics into something as, like, messy as AI?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And to be fair, Ortiz doesn't shy away from it at all. He acknowledges that even with the best intentions, putting justice AI into practice, it's not going to be easy. There are going to be all these complex social and political factors, and we have to be very aware of unintended consequences, things we didn't see coming.
So how do we mitigate those risks? Like, if we're talking about this being implemented on a larger scale in the real world, what needs to be in place to make sure these principles, these justice AI values, that they don't get lost in translation? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Ortiz really stresses how important this constant back and forth is, this dialogue between stakeholders. And that's key. It can't just be the tech people making these decisions on their own. You need the ethicists, the policymakers, the technologists, and crucially, the people who are most impacted by these systems, the community members themselves. They all need to be at the table, working together.
So it's not just about building a better algorithm. It's about building a better world around that algorithm. One where these values, equity and inclusion, are just baked into every stage of the process from the ground up.
Exactly. It's a systemic shift, not just a technological one. And like with any systemic shift, it takes time. It takes a sustained effort and a willingness to constantly question the way things are. One thing that really stuck with me is this idea that Ortiz leaves us with, justice AI as a catalyst.
A catalyst.
He really believes that this approach has the power to ignite this broader transformation, not just within Silicon Valley, but in society as a whole.
Wow, that's a powerful thought. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels like we're left with, honestly, more questions than answers. But I think that's a good thing, don't you think? I mean, it means this conversation, it's just getting started.
I couldn't agree more. That's what's so great about a deep dive like this, right? It's about sparking your curiosity, encouraging you to think critically, and hopefully inspiring you to learn more about, this incredibly important intersection of technology and social justice.
You've definitely given us a lot to think about today. So to our listener, as you kind of go down this rabbit hole of justice AI, we'll leave you with this. What really resonated with you today? What sparked your curiosity? And what questions are you taking with you as you continue to explore this topic? Because it is a journey and it's always evolving. This deep dive might be over, but the journey toward a more just and equitable future through technology, that's only just beginning.